Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, June the 17th, 2025. Today, Mars moves into Virgo, and I regard this as being an important event. You know, Mars has been in Leo, the sign before Virgo, for a long time on and off, since I think the beginning of November last year. Okay, it has gone back into Cancer, but this Mars in Leo influence, has been around for some time. And now it's over. Mars changes sign. And in this video, I want to consider what it means for Mars to move into Virgo. And I want to, look at some example charts and, also consider one country and one organization who have got their suns at very early Virgos, who I think might be influenced by this sign change by Mars. But before I look at Mars in Virgo, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, June the 17th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And so turning to the chart for today, there is the moon in Pisces. Moon is very much in Pisces. Doesn't matter what your time zone is. And so, with the moon in Pisces, moon is in a water sign, and it's kind of making a trine to Jupiter. Now, this trine to Jupiter is separating, but still, moon in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer, it is the first trine relationship between the moon and Jupiter since Jupiter has had its sign change. Remember, Jupiter's now in Cancer. And so I do think that we are going to feel this aspect, especially if you're in Australia and New Zealand or East Asia. But I think all of us, to some extent, will pick up on it. And don't forget that Jupiter is in Cancer, the sign of the moon, and the moon, Jupiter is in Cancer's sign, and the moon is in Pisces. Pisces is a sign ruled by Jupiter. So, this is the first mutual reception by sign that we've had with Jupiter, since it's made its sign change. So, the fact that the moon and Jupiter are now in mutual reception does suggest that, for many of us, it can be a good day and things really can move. And the moon is making a sextile to Venus. Venus is in Taurus, in a sign where the moon is exalted. So, in fact, the moon and Venus are in mutual reception by exaltation. The moon is in Pisces, which is Venus's sign of exaltation. Venus is in Taurus, a sign of moon's exaltation. So we actually have two mutual receptions involving the moon. So that really does suggest that things really are looking good for some of us. Obviously we've got to relate to those energies. Moon, Venus, Jupiter, they're not in fire signs. This is not about fireworks. It's not about sudden strokes of luck sort of coming from nowhere. I mean, it can always happen, but it's more about just being comfortable. Perhaps being comfortable in one's own skin. Perhaps we can be comfortable in our own skin, regardless of our sign, and also regardless of what's happening in the world. I think that we're all feeling worried by ongoing events in the Middle East, for example, but it's not just the Middle East, and so there can be a chance here for some of us to relax and to start to get things in perspective. Now, we do have additionally a semi-square between the Sun and Venus. So Sun and Venus are exactly 45 degrees apart. And there are several ways of looking at the semi-square between Sun and Venus. Now, you could say that the semi-square is just an aspect. It doesn't matter the fact that it's a hard aspect. And so the Sun and Venus coming together, Sun in Taurus, Sun in, let me get that right, Sun in Gemini, Venus in Taurus, they're coming together, and it's just good for getting on with people. Alternatively, you could say that there is a clash between the Sun and Venus. I've just said that it can be quite a smooth day, but the Sun in Gemini semi-square Venus, that might indicate that the wrong thoughts, the wrong questions could spoil things. And perhaps, we shouldn't think too much and ask questions which really don't have to be asked. And, that Sun in Gemini is starting to look a little isolated. There aren't any other planets in Gemini. And the Sun is, of course, getting ready to move into Cancer. And, some of the things we do think, say, suggest, may not be appropriate. It may not be right for the situation that we are in. So that could in turn undermine relationships. Although I actually think it could be a great day for relationships because of those mutual receptions. But, that Sun in Gemini could potentially spoil things, but it needn't spoil things. And I think that for most of us, we should try to have a relaxing day, and we should focus on getting on with people rather than for looking for division. Geminis can do that. I'm speaking as a Gemini, Sun in Gemini, and I do sometimes look for how people are different from each other. I can remember in the past, I sometimes have incidents, being a Sun in Gemini, when everyone is in agreement, and I'm in perhaps a group with lots of people around me. Everyone is agreeing with each other, and it just can make me feel so anxious when there's a lot of agreement. And the moment an argument breaks out, it's got nothing to do with me, but the moment people start arguing, I can sometimes feel more relaxed. It's sometimes do you know what I mean? You probably don't know what I mean, but then I'm a Gemini, and perhaps I have a rather perverse view of the world sometimes. And of course, there is the big event today, which is Mars moving into Virgo. And this is, if you like, the headline event. I will be talking about Mars in Virgo later on in this video. Now, Mars is still quite ego-focused, even though it is in Virgo, because it's conjunct Regulus. And so, with Mars conjunct Regulus, one does think of kingship. And I was just thinking that over the weekend, there were all these sort of the No King's Day protests against Trump. And, I don't have a view on that. If people want to protest, that's fine. And it's just interesting that this obsession with kingship is taking place as Mars is conjunct Regulus. And, of course, Regulus is the royal star. And now that Mars is in Virgo, well, it's still conjunct Regulus. In fact, over the last few decades, Regulus has the star Regulus, I think, has processed into Virgo. I mean, Virgo, it's now in Virgo, the very beginning of Virgo. So Mars is conjunct Regulus. So even though Mars is moving into Virgo, there's still an obsession about kings, who is a king, who's not a king, who shouldn't be a king. And on a positive note, we can assert our regality if that's what we want to do, and it is still a good time for interacting with important people, perhaps getting in touch with important people. But Mars moving into Virgo, overall, it's a very different energy from Mars being in Leo, Regulus aside. And okay, that first couple of degrees as Mars moves into very early Virgo, there might still be a Leo feel to it, because some of the symbolism of Regulus and Leo are quite similar. But, looking at things on a more sort of longer term perspective, Virgo is traditionally seen as a service-based sign. It's thinking about, what you can do for other people. And it's not necessarily about the ego. I mean, it can also be, very focused on details. Mars is, where are we putting our energy? Mars in Leo, we put our energy perhaps into building ourselves up. Mars in Virgo, we put our energy into just creating a structure and making sure that everything is in order, that everything is in the right place, and that all the details are sorted out, all the Virgo stuff, and we just can put a lot of energy into that. And that can be a good thing, because if we put energy in that direction, it means we don't make mistakes. We can cover ourselves, and we'll be thinking about everything that can go wrong. Are we fully insured? Do we need to get insurance? Do we need to be more careful? And so Mars in Virgo can do all that. So it's not a bad thing for Mars to be in Virgo, but it just does change the way people put their energy, where people put their energy. And at its worst, Mars in Virgo, can be obsessed about detail, it can be pernickety, and it can criticize for the sake of it. But I will be talking about all of that later on in the video. By the way, Mars stays in Virgo until, let me just tell you when Mars leaves Virgo. I think it's August the 7th, I make it, that Mars leaves. No, actually, Mars... I know, well, actually, August the 6th or the 7th, Mars moves out of Virgo and into Libra. And by the way, I think that Mars moves into Virgo at 9:35 a.m. London time. So if you're in California, Mars will move into Virgo at 1:35 in the morning. And if you're in Australasia, then Mars will move into Virgo sometime this evening. Now, talking about Australasia, here is a chart for today, set for noon, set for Sydney rather than New York. And this is just a chart that is a representative of Australasia and East Asia. And it's not so different from the chart for the Americas. The moon is still in Pisces, and okay, very, very early in the morning. If you're in Australasia, the moon might be in late Aquarius, but I wouldn't worry about that too much. And so the moon is in early Pisces, making an exact trine to Jupiter. So yes, it's true that the moon is trine Jupiter for all of us. It doesn't matter where we are. But if you are in Australasia, you're going to feel that moon trine Jupiter perhaps more intensely than elsewhere. And of course, the moon trine Jupiter it's a fortunate aspect. Things go well under the influence of that moon Jupiter trine, all things being equal. So, while there's not a big deal of difference, but a great deal of difference between Australasia and the Americas, maybe if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you're going to be ever so slightly luckier than if you're in California or New York. But I don't want to sort of distinguish between different people having different levels of luck. So if you are in Australasia, just take advantage of that trine between the moon and Jupiter. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, and still we have that T-square going on. I mean, this is boring, but Mars, Jupiter and Neptune are quite slow moving planets. So once they form a T-square, it lasts for some time. And Mars is still opposition Neptune. Mars is still square Jupiter. Not as strong as it used to be, but Mars square Jupiter. Well, we're feeling Mars square Jupiter heliocentrically. We can see what's going on. Okay, geocentrically, you've got Mars square Uranus still, but Mars square Jupiter can be about the excessive use of force. So with heliocentric Mars square Jupiter, once you get involved in a war situation, it's difficult to stop. You just keep going. If someone's firing rockets at you, you fire rockets back, and it's difficult to see how the situation can stop. Where maybe one side will run out of missiles, but I'm sure it's more complicated than that, and I'm sure that there are diplomatic efforts being made all the time regarding Iran and Israel. There may be constraining influences on them, one hopes. And also, like yesterday, the Earth is still square Saturn. Again, not as strong as yesterday, but we can still feel it. We can still feel that there are limits to what we can do, and limits to our influence. And one other thing, Mars is trine Pluto. Again, not an exact trine to Pluto, but with Mars trine Pluto, we really want to see what we can do, what we can get away with, how much energy and force we can bring to bear. And again, this is a heliocentric chart, so that this may say more about groups, institutions, governments, rather than individuals. So let me now look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, June the 17th, 2025. Aries. Aries, the moon is in Pisces, and so with the moon in Pisces, making a trine to Jupiter. I mean, it's not necessarily an exact trine to Jupiter, but it is a trine which I regard as being quite fortunate. It does allow you, to feel good about yourself without necessarily having to do much. And there are things you might want to do, and you might feel that you have to make an effort, but do you want to make an effort? And it may be that really you don't. And many Arians are perhaps in the mood for just relaxing and doing nothing in particular. I mean, there are things to observe and watch, and additionally, there are things you need to keep to yourself. I mean, you can't be open and honest, all the time, and under those circumstances, it might be best to be in situations where you don't have to be honest, where you can just keep your own counsel and not have to put yourself in a position where people are asking you questions, and that's not something you really want to do. And one sign change we do have today, which I do think is quite an important sign change for you, is the fact that Mars is moving out of Leo into Virgo. And this is, it is an important change, and it could have an influence on the way you present yourself and on what you're trying to do, and your general approach. And so now that Mars is in Virgo, you might be of the view that things have to be done right. You can't assume that things will just work out all by themselves. And with Mars in Leo, you could have had a sense of your own power. Really felt your power. But now that Mars is in Virgo, perhaps you understand that self-belief on its own is not enough. I mean, you still can have self-belief, and don't forget Mars is on Regulus, the royal star, so there is something about you that is special, even sort of regal, if you want to be a monarch in your own home or in your own environment. You certainly can be. And now with Mars Mars moving through Virgo, you just see that you can't leave things to chance, and you're going to want to make sure that everything is done properly. And this applies, across the board, to all your activities. It's not just about your work and your ambitions. It's about your health, and your health matters. You want to feel as fit and healthy as possible. Now, sometimes Aries can forget about their health. I mean, not every Aries, but I think Aries does like to take action. It likes to do what it wants to do at a particular moment. And so if you just feel like eating something, Aries can just want to take action. And actually, that is something about food and the cardinal signs. I have noticed, I mean, maybe it's just my noticing is rather selective, but when it comes to eating, I've noticed that when cardinal signs want to eat, they need to eat immediately. Now, me as a Gemini, when I want to eat, I can just pretend I don't need to eat, and I can play games about eating, and I can convince myself that I don't need to eat, and I can just put up with hunger, perhaps because I just feel good about it, and I'm not going to demand food right now, and I can wait it out. Because when I do eat, I don't like to eat small portions, by the way. But anyway, you don't care. I don't like to eat tons of stuff all at once. Small portions I don't like. But you don't care about my dietary habits. What matters is your dietary habits. And I don't know how this works, whether you can relate to this, but there can be this feeling, when you want to eat, you want to eat. So if you perhaps are hungry, you see something you want to eat, you just eat it. And perhaps it doesn't matter what it is. And that could relate to impulse eating. I'm not saying this is you. I'm just sort of speculating here. And so, with Mars in moving into Virgo, this is a time to think about diet and routine and what you eat, when you eat, how you eat, and that's one aspect of it. But just remember, this is just astrology. It's very general. I'm not trying to single you out at all. And it's not just food. It's the whole way you look after yourself, and that impulsiveness of Aries just can sometimes be dangerous. Or at least unhealthy, because you do what you feel like doing, and sometimes you forget about your own body. But no need to forget about your body now that Mars is in Virgo. And so between now and August, when is it, August the 6th, August the 7th, as Mars moves through Virgo, you have an opportunity to sort yourself out and make yourself sort of healthier and have a more disciplined life. And if you've got unhealthy habits, we've all got unhealthy habits after all, then maybe this is a chance to do something about it and to really think, what you need to do. And so, do make the most of Mars in Virgo. Virgo is not, of course, the most exciting sign for Mars to be in, especially if you're an Aries, but I certainly do think that it can be useful. Taurus, it looks to me like being a good day. Things are going to be easier than yesterday, and there's going to be a feeling that you are in the right place, and you don't necessarily have to do anything. The moon is in Pisces and Venus is in Taurus. Now, that's important because the moon and Venus are in mutual reception by exaltation. Because the moon in Pisces is in Venus's sign of exaltation, Venus is in Taurus, which is the moon's sign of exaltation, and so with the moon and Venus in exaltation, and better still, the moon and Venus are making a sextile aspect to each other, that really indicates to me that it could be actually quite a fortunate day when things are working well. Doesn't have to be a dramatic day, not at all, but your ability to, present yourself is going to be really very good. And again, you don't have to present yourself dramatically, you just have to be yourself. And you can come over as being a kind, warm and friendly person who's not going to cause trouble. And so if you want to get on with people, you'll just know what to do, you'll know what to say. And so if you're socializing at whatever level, I do think that you can be very, very effective. And it is an opportunity to perhaps make new friends, make new contacts. And you have to do this, in the right way. Part of you might hesitate. Do you want to stick your neck out? Do you want to take the initiative? And you might worry about whether it's the right thing to do. But I'm sure it is the right thing to do. And if you do try to be sociable, then I think that you'll do it very well, and you'll just be very natural about it. So it goes without saying that relationships should work well today. Yeah, because you can get on with people, and if there have been recent misunderstandings, then these misunderstandings can perhaps be resolved, and it might be up to you to take the initiative to start the conversation off. And when I talk about conversation, I'm not talking about anything in particular. It's just lines of communication. And in fact, it's not a good idea to focus too much on specific things. We need to talk about this. No, it's not about that. It's just about getting on with people. In fact, if you did take the view that, you need to talk about something, let's talk about money, for example, or some other important issue. No, that would spoil things. And instead, you should be concentrating on just getting on with people, looking for common ground. And there might be something that's annoying you that you feel you want to bring it up, but you can do that later. And your first job is to create an atmosphere of trust and increase mutual confidence. And Taurus, that is something you really can do today. Another thing to point out is that Mars is moving into Virgo. And Mars moving into Virgo might say something about other people as well. Some of the people you have to deal with are experiencing a change, and you might have thought that someone was really inflexible, and you might have assumed that they just would not change their mind about anything, that they had an ego problem, and you might have made a lot of assumptions. And with Mars in Virgo, or Mars moving through Virgo, you might want to change those assumptions. Not necessarily today or tomorrow, because Mars is on Regulus at the moment, and so with Mars on Regulus, certain people continue to have a high opinion of themselves. But as Mars moves away from Regulus, you can start to see people in a new way, and people you thought were being unreasonable or just basically have unreasonable personalities actually are not so bad. You can actually work with them and relate to them. Gemini, you feel that there are things that absolutely need to be got off the ground. You've done your thinking, and of course Geminis do a lot of thinking, especially when the sun is moving through your sign. But as far as you're concerned, things have changed, and you do have a better understanding of what works, what doesn't work, what you can do, what you can't do, and also what you're interested in. You need to know what you're interested in, and you're clearer about all that now, and you're starting to feel that there really are possibilities of making things happen, and also of making an impact. And whatever you're good at, Gemini, you can demonstrate it. So what are you good at? That can be an issue with Geminis. I remember a long time ago someone said to me, I know you're good at something, but I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. And I've sort of always remembered that. And that might be a Gemini issue, because some Geminis maybe refuse to specialize, and they know a lot about a lot of different things, but where is the point of expertise? And it doesn't matter how old you are, there is always a time when you've got to think about what you are good at. Where is your area of expertise? You unfortunately can't be good at everything. Okay, maybe you can, but I don't think you can. I think that would be very difficult. And so now might be a time to really sort of put the energy into what works best, and to be able to sort of recognize that. And I think that now is perhaps the time to be doing that. And if you're doing the thing that you're meant to be doing, then almost straight away it's going to start working, and you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. In fact, the moon in Pisces is in the sign of Jupiter, and Jupiter is in, because Jupiter rules Pisces, and it's in mutual reception to Jupiter, and that should be of great assistance to you. It will really allow you to project yourself, to project your ambitions, and to project what you're good at, what your real area of expertise is. And so with the moon trine Jupiter, it works, and you actually can be rewarded for it. And there could even be a financial dimension to it. I mean, maybe not immediately, but you can certainly lay the foundations for it, if you have the chance, if that's something that is important to you. So it really does matter, Gemini, that you get yourself together, and you don't have to reveal everything. There are certain things that you want to hold back. If you showed people everything who you were, everything you can do, well, there'd be no more surprises. So there are a couple of things you do have to work through on your own, and you will make some connections there, and be able to spring some more surprises, at a later stage. Now, one event going on today, Gemini, which we do need to talk about, is Mars moving into Virgo. And Virgo is an important sign in the Gemini chart. It is arguably the most personal sign, the most secret sign. It is at the bottom of the chart, of the Gemini horoscope. And so, with Mars moving into Virgo, like it or not, you may find yourself putting more effort than expected into your home and into sort of domestic pursuits. And many Geminis aren't particularly enthused by what's going on in the home and the domestic situation. It just seems rather tedious, rather parochial, and you'd rather be doing something else. And you might even think that you're meant for better things. I mean, every Gemini has an arrogant streak, isn't that true? Even if they're not honest about it. And so Mars moving into Virgo actually means that you've got to look down rather than up. Look at what's going on right in front of you before you move out of your front door. And really, you've got to make sure that where you are is secure. And additionally, you don't want to take things too seriously. There is some danger with Mars moving into Virgo that once you actually start to think about your home and your family, you could find yourself actually putting a huge amount of energy into it. It might be uncharacteristic, or it could be, there could be demands on your energy, and it's not really a Gemini thing, but it might say something about the times you're in, at least until Mars moves out of Virgo into Libra. So having the right understanding of your home and your family and how you get on with your family, with Mars and moving into Virgo, does matter. You've got to pay attention to this, but you can't pay too much attention to it because you don't want to obsess. So ask yourself, what is your relationship to your home? What does it mean? How much energy should you be putting into it? You need to put enough energy into it, but not too much energy. Because if you put too much energy into it, then, well, you could cause a lot of trouble, and no one is going to be relaxed. And it is possible between now and the beginning of August that there are things requiring your attention at home that you kind of hadn't quite planned for, or things requiring attention in terms of demands from your family, and you have to get the balance right. But don't worry about this. I think that you do have an opportunity to resolve a few long-standing issues that perhaps you hadn't bothered with them for maybe a couple of years. But now you have a chance to sort things out, and if you get it right, by the time Mars moves into Libra at the beginning of August, things should be a lot clearer and perhaps a lot easier. Cancer, it can be a great day. I mean, why not? Things are working well for you, and you're feeling at one with everything, and that's great. And your emotions are on great form. You do feel an emotional oneness with your environment. I mean, as much as is possible. I mean, we can't feel complete emotional oneness, but you can give it your best shot. And right now, with the Moon making a mutual reception to Venus, things are good. The Moon is of course your ruler. It's in Pisces, a sign where Venus is exalted, and Venus is in Taurus, a sign where the Moon is exalted. So Moon and Venus are in mutual reception by exaltation, and so that should really help you. It should make you feel good about yourself, and you just might additionally feel that you're in tune with everything, that you and other people actually are on the same wavelength, or at least a very similar wavelength. And there can also be a certain spirituality to the day, just being aware that you're in the right place, you're doing the right thing, you're mixing with the right people, and all the time something is looking after you. And talking about your social life, I think that you should make the effort. Recently you may have been wary of other people, even if you knew them well, but now I don't think there's much to be bothered about. And through other people you can have new experiences and see things in a new way, and at the same time there is no stress. It is a time when you can be yourself, and no one is going to sort of undermine you, and so that does look good. And additionally, the Moon is making a trine to Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter's now in Cancer, and so with the Moon trine Jupiter, okay, you might have felt that trine yesterday. It depends where you were. So I think if you were in the Americas, then on Monday you might have felt the trine between the Moon and Jupiter, but it's still there. And the Moon and Jupiter, that's another mutual reception, because the Moon is in Jupiter's sign and Jupiter is in the Moon sign, and so that really allows things to move, and you can present yourself, very well, and your social skills are going to be excellent. Now, one thing that is happening today is that Mars is moving into Virgo, and Mars moving into Virgo is going to have an influence, on all of us, regardless of our sign. But it does potentially affect different signs in different ways. And so, with Mars moving into Virgo, it could say something about movement, travel, especially short distance travel, and how you get from place to place. And Mars can be quite an aggravating energy, and it's possible that cars and other means of transport over the next couple of months, or until August the 6th and 7th, or 6th or 7th, just could be irritating. Not necessarily because they break down, but they can cause problems in many different ways. You might find that some route you take every day is more congested than usual. It may be as congested as it always was, but your response might be different. Getting annoyed about transport delays, even if those delays are always there. But right now, with Mars moving into Virgo, it may be especially annoying. And additionally, you have to remember that Mars is quite a hostile force, or at least it can be hostile. It can certainly be defensive. And so do think about where all the possibilities are for disagreements. Think about your neighbor, your neighbors. With Mars moving into Virgo, it's possible that you and your neighbors don't get on. There's always some reason to have an argument with your neighbors. You can't see eye to eye on everything. And so, be careful what you say and how you present shared issues, whether it's offense, whether it's noise, whether it's, what animals are doing, how you relate to particular trees, whatever it is, you have to be reasonable. You have to make a special effort to be reasonable, and you don't want to aggravate things. And so that's something that you could do. Of course, with trees, it's very important that you keep the trees standing, isn't it? Always important. Well, unless a tree is dangerous. But anyway, just do think about the possibilities that you and your neighbours might have a disagreement. And it's not just neighbours in terms of where you live. It may be neighbours like who you meet all the time. Could be people you know at work, for example, people you have constant interaction with, and that Mars in Virgo could cause problems. And part of a problem could be with Mars in Virgo that over the next couple of months you become perhaps sharper in terms of your language, and you just say things and the words come out, and you just can't help it, and in the process you could upset someone. So that's certainly a way of seeing it. And this raises the issue, where do you put your energy? Because you might have surplus energy, and where would you put it? And walking, short distance traveling. There's even perhaps a connection with dance. I don't know anything about dance, but if you have an opportunity to dance over the next couple of months between now and the beginning of August, that might be particularly useful. It might really be the right thing to do, and it might really sort of help you to not just relax, but to enjoy yourself, and to sort of get the various energies in balance. Leo, we have a few things going on. Well, for a start, we have Mars moving out of your sign. So Mars has been in your sign for a long time on and off, since the beginning of November, since just around the time of the US presidential election. And so Mars moving out of Leo could be a blessing, because Mars is quite an aggravating planet, or at least it can be. And so, when Mars is moving through Leo, it has the potential to really stir things up and make you sort of annoyed about things, and you feel you absolutely have to express yourself, you have to get attention. And additionally, just Mars just creates events which just do annoy you, and you want to respond to these events, but you're not quite sure how, and at times you might have got yourself into trouble by perhaps being too hasty. And now that Mars has moved out of Leo into Virgo, you could say that it's taken the pressure off you. Now you don't have to deal with so much. Let other people deal with it, and your focus is changing. Now, Mars is always going to affect you regardless of what sign it is, and so it's possible with Mars moving into Virgo that there is sort of more attention on the material side of things. For example, putting energy into getting hold of material objects. Of course, that could be money. So that might be a way in which Mars in Virgo is working, and how it could be working between now and the beginning of August. So don't ignore the financial dimension, but don't get too annoyed about it, because Mars in Virgo could just get annoyed about some financial detail that perhaps is unimportant. Perhaps we're talking about sums of money which are actually quite small, but you might make them sort of more significant than they actually deserve. Now, aside from that, Leo, at the moment, you're fairly incisive, and you're able to understand what matters, and you can see things in a new way, and you can see people in a new way. And this may especially apply from the viewpoint of business and career. So if you're working with people, if you've got clients, or you're trying to sell something, then you start to understand the underlying emotional dynamics in a new way, and it does start to become very clear. And it's not something you would want to reveal. We're talking about silent processes, and it's not typically Leo. One doesn't normally associate Leo with this kind of sort of emotional depth. But right now, from an emotional viewpoint, you are able to see things in a new way, and understand things in a new way, and actually start to understand the way things are and what you have to do. And that means that some people's psychology is actually an open book. You understand them, and because you understand someone, because you know about their strengths and weaknesses, that certainly gives you an advantage. But it just needn't be about you getting ahead, you feeling you absolutely have to make progress at all costs, you being manipulative. It doesn't have to be about that. It can actually be an opportunity to get on with people because you understand them, and you can make new connections, and you'll perhaps realize that a connection that you thought was closed to you, you thought perhaps that you and a group of people were not on the same wavelength, you actually realize you do have things in common. So do try to reach out and be part of something wider than yourself, even if you don't necessarily feel like it, and you might not feel there's much of a point. But if you actually make the effort to be sociable, then I think that in the end you could be rewarded. Virgo, Mars is moving into your sign, and it's been waiting for some time to move into your sign, but now it's there. And Mars moving into Virgo is certainly an important event. And with Mars moving into Virgo, it's certainly an energizing influence, and you might feel it straight away. And when Mars moves into Virgo, it is actually it's on Regulus, the royal star, and so this puts you in a new light. There is always something about Virgo which, well, not always, but very often, which is sort of understated, and you don't like to sort of show off for the sake of it. You don't like to draw too much attention to yourself. But with Mars conjunct Virgo conjunct Regulus, it is a time when you can get noticed. And Virgo, you might feel that this is a time to be assertive. And Mars moves through Virgo, well, for the next 6-7 weeks. I think it moves out of Virgo on August the 6th or the 7th. So over this time, make a real effort to get noticed. It does matter. And okay, you don't want to pick fights with people. You could, because Mars, is a high energy planet. It likes to see the differences between people. I mean, that's what Mars is about. And so if someone else has a different opinion from you, Mars in Virgo is going to make this very clear. But you have to make sure that Mars in Virgo doesn't get out of hand, and be reasonable, and don't allow some of your own traits to get out of hand. Yes, you might notice people's mistakes, you might notice their imperfections, but that doesn't mean to say that you have to immediately point them out. Really, it may not be important. So if you are using your energy a lot, ask yourself, is it the right thing to be doing? Is it really where you want to be going? And you don't want to be in a situation where you can't see the wood for the trees. Now, one thing that Virgos really do need to think about is themselves. It all starts with you, and you need to think about what it is that makes you different, and what is your unique contribution. Now, some Virgos can be very self-critical, and so you can look at yourself and you can convince yourself that there is nothing special going on, that you don't have anything to contribute, that no one cares, and that if you can do something, there's always someone who can do it better. Well, that's not a reasonable way of looking at things. I mean, it's nice to be modest, but one can be too modest. And I think that today is a chance, Virgo, to really understand what makes you different, and what you can do that really is not just good, but it's better than what everyone else can do. So look at your exceptionality and what makes you exceptional, because you are exceptional in particular areas. And I'm not just saying that to just make you happy. I'm just saying that because it's true. And so you need to think about what that is, and that may say something about the next few weeks. It's a time to be taking your energy and really boosting yourself, and really boosting what you're good at, and really making it clear that you are special in particular areas. And that's not about bragging. It's just about being realistic, and accepting that you have a role, there's something you're supposed to be doing, and now is the time to be doing it. And yeah, too much modesty can really hold you back and is in no one's best interest. And yeah, and too much modesty can actually contradict your fundamental destiny. And finally, as far as relationships are concerned, Moon is moving through Pisces, your opposite sign. The Moon is also making a sextile to Venus, and Moon and Venus are in mutual reception by exaltation. They're in each other's signs of exaltation. And because of this Moon sextile Venus, I think, Virgo, this can be a time when, if you make the effort, you do have to make the effort, because Mars in Virgo can be quite defensive. But if you make the effort, you can find ways to link up with people, to get noticed, and provided you're not critical, then it's going to be quite easy to get people to be attracted to you and to sort of start to move into your orbit, because actually you can come over as being quite easygoing. I mean, you might not feel easygoing, but the general impression you give, if you like, your aura is pretty sympathetic and welcoming. So it's not a day where you have to be alone, and you can find kindred spirits. Libra, we have Mars moving into Virgo. I mean, I have to say that Mars is moving into Virgo, really for just about every sign, because it will affect every sign. And so Mars moving into Virgo, it is about where you might want to put your energy. Mars is an energy planet. And so you could say that with Mars moving into Virgo, that you might feel that you want to do things in your own way. And if there's anything you really want to put a lot of energy into, it could be the case, Libra, that you want to do it behind closed doors. You don't want people to know what your priorities are. And so over the next month or two, maybe there's a part of your life which could be quite secretive, and you don't want to tell other people what's going on. And that Mars in Virgo might additionally say something about another person, and it may say something about the development of a particular relationship. And there could be, for example, someone who is or has been around you all the time. You've known them, you've got used to them, and with Mars in Virgo moving through Virgo, they might almost disappear or keep a lower profile, and you're wondering, where have they gone? Why are they not around anymore? Or they may not be talking to you so much. And that could even be the case with someone you know really well. That you might be in some kind of relationship with them, and suddenly they're hardly there. And it could just be something temporary while Mars is moving through Virgo, because that is the symbolism. Virgo in the Libra chart is a low profile sign. Mars is a ruler of Aries, your opposite sign. So logically, if Mars is moving through Virgo, you just might find that not everyone is as available as they used to be, and it's not a situation that should necessarily bother you. And by the beginning of August, things might return to normal. And elsewhere, we do have a sextile between the Moon and Venus. And this Moon-Venus sextile really should work for you. And they're not just in sextile. Moon in Pisces, sextile Venus in Taurus, but they're also in mutual reception by sign. They are in each other's signs. And so with this mutual reception, it's a time when you can certainly organize yourself, when you can really get yourself together. But maybe on an emotional level, and we're perhaps focusing on the private side of who you are. And this reinforces what I was saying. It is quite a private day, and there's nothing that that has to be revealed, that has to be said. Now, there might be things that have to be done, but those things that have to be done can be done in your own way, and you're going to want everything to be done in a way that is quite organized, and where your own emotions are respected. I mean, your emotions do matter right now, and Libra, all things being equal, is not known to be an especially emotional sign, but all of us have emotions, and you have your emotions, and what you need emotionally is an environment which is stable, where there aren't surprises. And that's a kind of environment you can find, especially if you think ahead, and you make sure that you're not in the wrong place or surrounded by the wrong people. And that is possible. Some people get on with you very well. Some people are soothing and they boost you, but other people drag you down and they limit your freedom. And you do have to make that distinction. And you've got that. You actually have a sort of a double possibility that it is possible that the day is spoilt by the wrong types of people, but the day can actually be really boosted by the right types of people. So you've got to make the choice. And so, Libra, it's very important that you have the right environment today. And if you have the right environment, if you get everything right, and perhaps that means planning ahead, if you can do all that with the moon making a mutual reception to Venus, then today can be comfortable. It can be reassuring, and you might feel that you're laying the foundations for for the immediate future, and giving yourself the comfort and security that you need, and indeed that you deserve. Scorpio, Mars is out of Leo, and for a Scorpio, that's important. Scorpio, after all, is your ruler. So when Mars moves out of Leo, things change. So Mars has been in Leo on and off since November, and during this time, hopefully Scorpios have been thinking a great deal about what they want, and what you want to achieve, and what kind of progress you want to make, and hopefully you've done a good job. It depends, doesn't it? You have to remember, this is just 12-sign astrology. I don't have your precise chart in front of me, so to an extent, or to a great extent, I'm dealing with huge generalizations here. But I am just hoping that you have at the very least a good idea about where you're going, and what you want to achieve. And now that Mars is moving out of Leo, things do change. Now, Mars is still on Regulus, the royal star. In fact, today I think Mars is exactly on Regulus. And so with Mars conjunct Regulus, it's a fortunate time for Scorpios. It remains a fortunate time, and it is a time when you come over as being an important person, and with influence, and there's something quite regal about you. After all, Regulus is the royal star, but there is a change of emphasis as Mars moves into Virgo, and you may be starting to think, not just about particular desires, whether it's wealth, status, money, promotion, recognition. It's more about what is the purpose of it all? And that might be the question that Mars is presenting you. And of course, Mars does stay in Virgo until the beginning of August. And so you might find yourself battling with more existential questions. Why? What is it about? And what about the long-term future? The long-term future, not in a material sense, in a sort of targets, ambition sense, but more about, what is right for you? What kind of future were you born to enjoy? And so that might be something that you're battling with at the moment, and not just today, over the next month or two. And so do be ready for that. And in the process, you might need outside advice and help and support. You don't have to do everything alone. As a Scorpio, you sometimes feel that it's all about you and that you can't get any help, that all those thoughts, you're born alone, you die alone. I don't know whether that's necessarily true, but you might sort of feel the loneliness of it all. But sometimes you have to break out and realize that you're not alone, and through other people you can get some idea about what your actual destiny is. Now that does become more complex, maybe in a month's time when Mars actually makes a conjunction to the South Node, but I don't think we need to worry right now about what that Mars South Node conjunction means, because you might find that other people aren't always a good influence. They can potentially move you in the wrong direction and actually contradict your destiny. But I don't think we need, as I said, I don't think we need to worry about that right now. And additionally, today, looking at the specifics of today, Tuesday, the moon is moving through Pisces, and it is making a mutual reception to Venus, and by exaltation, not by sign. And so that connection between Moon and Venus actually today looks really good. Actually, it does allow you to to be yourself, but also to be yourself in a way that is quite easygoing, and regardless of any reservations you might have, in terms of actually the way you present yourself with that Moon-Venus mutual reception, you can really come over as being quite sort of easygoing and perhaps as being relaxing company. And you additionally can benefit from certain other people. Remember, Venus is in Taurus. Venus is in, Venus is in your opposite sign. It remains in your opposite sign, for a few more weeks, and so with that moon mutual reception to Venus, that could be an aspect that's just really good for getting on with people. So if you want to get on with people, relationships, new relationships, old relationships, there may even be romantic connotations if that's what you're looking for, with moon making that sextile to Venus. It's a very romantic aspect. It's not a dramatic aspect because it's not in fire signs, it's not in air signs, but it's just emotionally very easygoing. And of course, being a Scorpio, you are a water sign. Emotions are important to you, and I think that your emotions are going to be powerful but not off-putting. And so as an emotional and sympathetic being, you can really come into your own today with that Moon-Venus sextile. Sagittarius, at the moment, you're slightly torn. I mean, intrinsically, you feel that you would like to just keep your distance. That's how you'd like it to be. Not for very long, but just at the moment. that feels the right place to be. If there has been a lot going on in the world, and things might still feel tense. And of course, heliocentrically, Mars is still making a square to Jupiter. So remember the heliocentric chart we looked at earlier. There is Jupiter, your ruler, heliocentrically in Cancer, both geocentrically and heliocentrically, and Mars is making a square to Jupiter, and that is an aggravating influence. And so, Sagittarius, you just might be of a view that it's just best to look after yourself and just to avoid things that are too complicated, and make sure that the four walls around you are all in good order, and that you are well defended, not just physically but emotionally as well. But there are other pressures, and one thing that is going on today is that Mars is moving into Virgo, and Virgo is a mutable sign. Sagittarius is a mutable sign. So when Mars moves into Virgo, it basically means that it's moving into a major angle of your chart, and it's actually quite a high profile angle. And so Mars in Virgo is almost a clarion call. It's telling you to wake up. It's telling you that something needs to be done, and there's something you have got to do. And to begin with, I don't think you want to do it. You'd rather be doing something else. But Mars is moving through Virgo between sort of now and August the 6th, August the 7th. And this is a time when, like it or not, you have to think about what you are trying to achieve, and put energy into this area, not in a crazy way. I mean, you could put your energy into a crazy way. You could be obsessed about getting everything right and feel that you've got to really, really push it to the limit. I mean, such an approach might work if you're the kind of Sagittarius that is perhaps a type A personality, and you're really into sorting out the details, making sure everything is done right. So if you put a supreme effort into being successful and to be getting noticed over the next couple of months, you might really do something spectacular. But you don't have to be so extreme. And it's important that also that you don't be too critical. You're trying to think about what is the path forward, and loads of distractions with Mars in Virgo. Well, should you do this? Should you do that? And what if it's not 100% perfect? But you keep going, and you keep focusing on what you want, where you want to be, and then I think that you can eventually sort of get to your destination. It may not be easy, and there may be a lot of sort of undergrowth to hack your way through, but in the end, you will get there. And today, might be the beginning of it all. And so, perhaps you need to start something. Especially as Mars is on Regulus, the royal star. Very fortunate star. Connected with success and accomplishment. So, that's maybe Sagittarius. Something you should be thinking about. Additionally, the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is your ruler. The moon is making actually a trine to Jupiter as well. And so that moon trine Jupiter does soften you. Mars moving into Virgo can be a bit tough. But right now with moon trine Jupiter, you have the ability to be sympathetic and to understand other people's perspectives. And so, if you make an effort to stop and listen and to feel, then you have a good opportunity to to really know what other people want, and you can actually be quite responsive, but not in a way that compromises your core individuality. Capricorn, there is stuff going on today, and you could say that the main thing is Mars moving into Virgo, and I'm really talking about Mars in Virgo for everyone. It affects us all, Mars moving into Virgo, but it affects us all in different ways. And with Mars in Virgo for you, you might think that you perhaps have missed something. That you know a lot. You've had a lot of experiences. You may be well read or even well travelled, but there still seems to be something missing, and you might not have been aware that something was missing, but now you feel it. You can feel that you don't know enough. It's always good to feel that you don't know enough. That's a good place to be. And so with Mars moving into Virgo, you might be of a view that you need to make up for lost time. There are things you need to discover and find out about, and that could be travel. If you got existing travel plans, but as I always say, to make discoveries, you don't have to physically travel. You can travel in the mind, in spirit. So many ways of traveling, and so do make the effort, but you have to do it in a way that is quite sort of systematic, and you don't want to scatter your energies. What you absolutely don't want to be is in a situation where you are, for example, desperately looking for meaning. We look for meaning here and there and here and everywhere, and if one tries to look for meaning in too many directions, one doesn't find any meaning at all. It's just chaos, and it's very disheartening. So meaning can't be forced. Meaning has to develop, and you have to allow things to work, allow the cosmos to reveal itself. You can't demand that the universe shows evidence that it is a real living being. You have to just relax and just see what happens. Of course, you might want to see that in for example, a Christian sense, or whatever you believe in. Looking for God to manifest, and you can't. This is not something that can be forced, and you can find you might be looking for meaning, but it just may take time for that meaning to reveal itself. And when it does reveal itself, of course, very likely that it will be when you least expect it. It will just be perhaps in a moment that seems trivial, but suddenly it will all come together. So if you feel that something is missing, don't panic and don't feel that you can force it, but just put yourself in the right environment, and then things will happen, in their own way. And aside from that, we do have the moon making a sextile to Venus and a trine to Jupiter. Okay, that trine to Jupiter is separating. It's going to be particularly strong if you're in Australasia. If you're in, say, California or Alaska or Hawaii, it won't be quite as strong, but still the moon is in Pisces and Jupiter is in Cancer, so the two planets do have a trine relationship to one another. And so this moon trine Venus, moon sextile Venus trine Jupiter is going to allow you to, not just be yourself, but it's also going to allow you to, express yourself very effectively, not necessarily in a typically Capricorn way. You can be sympathetic, and you can show real understanding, and that is going to be appreciated. And this is perhaps going to be a real reminder that Jupiter is now in Cancer, your opposite sign. You know, other people are increasingly going to be there for you, and you can benefit from other people. Other people are going to bring you luck. They're going to bring you opportunities over the next year and more. At least I think they are. I mean, if we just look at the astrological symbolism, of course, this is 12-sign astrology. It is by definition a generalization, but you know, I do think that getting luck from other people could be a theme of the next year. And today, with those aspects, particularly with the moon trine Venus, you know, you may start to see where the opportunity lies. Okay, you may not be able to fully take advantage of the opportunity, but it may be obvious to you that soon enough things will be moving, and it's not just about you. It is about, you know, it is about other people as well. And yeah, we do have Moon making a mutual reception to Venus, and that Moon mutual reception to Venus may be suggestive of another person who is, you know, emotionally very balanced, and is also, you know, emotionally reassuring, but who is also on your wavelength, especially on a creative level. So that's the day, Capricorn. It is the beginning of something, you know, with Mars moving into Virgo, perhaps the beginning of a journey, but that's really looking at it on a sort of a longer term level. On a shorter term level, I think that you might find that, you know, other people can be a real plus in your life. Aquarius today might be a time when you can quietly look after your own interests. You don't have to make a big fuss about it. You don't have to be dramatic. You just need to think about, you know, what does matter to you. And you might look around you. You might think about certain situations where you're at a disadvantage, where perhaps you have put yourself at a disadvantage. You didn't really know what you were doing, but now you realize that actually things could be better, and maybe you need to extricate yourself from a particular situation that is no longer working out for you. And again, you don't have to make a big fuss about it. You can just quietly remove yourself, and people might hardly notice. They might not be offended. And so perhaps you need to do an audit of your own interests and just make the changes, you know, where necessary. And, you know, all the while, Aquarius, you know, remind yourself that you are in control. I mean, you really are in control at the moment. Things don't have to happen to you if you don't want them to happen. And if you feel you need to take a stand for whatever reason, you absolutely can. But I just think in most cases it just won't come to that, and you can just quietly, you know, do whatever you feel is necessary. And one sign change we do have today, I think potentially quite an important sign change, is Mars moving into Virgo. So Mars has been moving through Leo for a fair amount of time. In fact, on and off, Mars has been moving through Leo, and since I think the beginning of November, since just before the US presidential election. And so, you know, Mars moving through Leo, which is your opposite sign. Okay, it did actually go back into Cancer, but there's certainly been a great chunks of time where Mars has been in this sign. And so while Mars has been in Leo, it might have been about sometimes other people and what other people were doing and how other people were trying to assert themselves and how they might have been trying to control you, and you had to deal with other people's idiosyncrasies, and it might have been exciting sometimes, but rather exhausting at other times. And now Mars is out of Leo, and with Mars moving out of Leo, you don't have to worry so much about what other people are doing, about their direct influence. And with Mars in Virgo, I think it's a time when you can probably be more self-contained. You can think about, what is important to you and what your priorities are, and in your own way, you can start taking things seriously. And actually, when Mars moves, as soon as Mars moves into Virgo, it actually starts making a quincunx to Saturn, and so that quincunx to Saturn, which it's not exact, right now, but as this aspect does become exact, you may realize that some things you haven't taken seriously enough. That you were perhaps living in the past. You thought things were easy, and you now see that they're not quite so easy, but how do you integrate this? And so it may be about you continuing to be a social being with lots of things to say, lots of things to observe, being in touch with lots of different people, but also having a new seriousness about you. And I think that this seriousness is going to be, to begin with, slightly difficult to integrate, but I do think that you can do it, and once you've found the right match, then I think that you're just going to feel more comfortable, and yes, more powerful as well. And additionally, from a material viewpoint, Aquarius, I think that it does actually look like being quite a good day. So if you've got any concerns about money and organization, then you may be able to sort them out relatively easily. And part of it is being reasonable, coming over as being reasonable, but part of it is also being very determined, knowing what matters, knowing what's important, and just keeping in mind your priorities. Because it is a time, Aquarius, when you do need to be thinking about yourself and your priorities, and perhaps you need to start off, today by thinking about what needs to be done and what you want, and making sure you get it. But I don't think you need to have a big conflict about it. I think it will actually be just easier than expected. Pisces, things are happening. We've got Mars moving into your opposite sign. And so Mars stays in Virgo until August the 6th, maybe August the 7th, around then. So nearly 2 months. You've got Mars in Virgo. So what does that mean for the average Pisces? Well, Virgo is your opposite sign, and so with Mars moving through Virgo, that could very well say something about relationships. And not every relationship may be as easy as you'd like it to be. And unfortunately, there is the possibility of disagreement. And Mars in Virgo could represent a person who has strong opinions and they're not ready to compromise. It could also be a person who just endlessly concentrates and focuses on the wrong things, and they're just more trouble than they're worth, or at least that might be how it feels. But you can't just make people go away just like that. They're always going to be there. And if you get one person to go away, then someone else will come in to replace them. So maybe, Pisces, you just have to accept the people that are around you, and you have to work with them, understand their idiosyncrasies, show some patience and tolerance, but you don't want to go all the way. I mean, don't forget that the south you have at the moment, the South Node is in Virgo, and the South Node is where you should not be going, or where it's easiest to be going as well. But part of you, Pisces, finds it easiest to just give in and to just do things another person's way, just because it's less of a problem than having to stand up for yourself. But the North Node is in Pisces, and with the North Node in Pisces, it's a time when you actually should be standing up for yourself and not compromising. And if you adopt such an approach, to begin with, it's difficult, especially with Mars in Virgo. So there is strong pressure to compromise, to give in, to indulge another person's obsessiveness, but that's not what you want to do. And so you have to resist Mars, but you need to accept it at the same time. I mean, that sounds contradictory, but you just have to. You have people to deal with, and these people aren't going away. On the other hand, Mars is not going to be in Virgo forever. By the beginning of August, it will leave and it will move into Libra, and of course that will represent new challenges. And, as far as the specifics of today are concerned, the moon is in your sign. This is a time when Pisceans can think about themselves and act in their own interests. And additionally, the moon is making a sextile to Venus, and it's making a trine to Jupiter. And those are great aspects. And that moon trine Jupiter, Jupiter's your ruler. Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception by sign, because the moon is in Pisces, which is a sign ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is in Cancer, a sign ruled by the moon. So that's a great trine between the moon and Jupiter, even if that moon and Jupiter is not exact and it's just a sign to sign aspect. But it's really going to help you out, and it's going to help you just enjoy yourself and be selfish about that enjoyment. If there's something you want to do, then and you really feel that it'd be good for you, and it links with your creativity, then go ahead. It's a time to be yourself. Now that moon Jupiter trine is going to be especially powerful if you're in Australia and New Zealand and Eastern Asia. If you're in the Americas, might not be quite so strong, but as I said, it's still there, even if it's just a sign to sign aspect. Moon in Pisces, Jupiter, moon in Pisces trine Jupiter in Cancer, and additionally the moon is making a sextile to moon in Pisces, making a sextile to Venus. So your ability to communicate, I would have said, is excellent. And it's not just about saying lots and lots of things. In fact, it's not that kind of communication at all. Your ability to communicate through emotions and body language is going to be excellent. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 40, which is deliverance. And deliverance is about escaping from something. We're involved with something that we're not happy with. We feel that we're stuck with it. Might be a bad situation. So, what is that bad situation you're involved with? Remember, this is just a reading for today. It needn't be a particularly dramatically bad situation, but something you'd rather not be involved in. Maybe you unwisely committed yourself to something. Okay, if it's a legal commitment, maybe it's going to be difficult to get out of it, but maybe it's just you've made a promise, or you've said you're going to do something, or you're just involved with something and you can just, it's moving from bad to worse, but you're just not quite sure how to extricate yourself from it. Now, what we have here is a moving line, and we have the fourth line from the top moving, and this line is relates to the toe, the big toe, I think, and that's just I read sort of different translations of it, and the question is, what does it mean to mean the big toe, having to, and what's that about? And one way of looking at it is to say that the big toe is something that's, it helps us to walk. We need our toes to walk properly, and perhaps we have become reliant on something. Because when I Ching talks about toes, it's often talking about something that is not part of who we are, which can seem strange because we need our toes. There's no doubt about that. But it's about something that is almost extraneous, and it might refer to a situation where people are hanging on to us, and we've got used to certain people being around us, and they're taking us for granted, perhaps we're taking them for granted, but they're not essential to who we are. And so we maybe have to free ourselves from these people, and that might be what deliverance is about, just delivering ourselves from everything that is just holding us back. And once we've cleared away the dross, it's going to be much easier, and we can actually take real action. But there is another way of looking at it. If we can start to show some proactiveness. So if we can start to move our toes, if it may not be perfect, it's just our toes, but we're trying to deal with a situation and it's hard, and we can perhaps free our toe from it, but we're still feeling stuck. But the thing is, we've started the process of liberating ourselves, and as soon as we start the process of liberation, as soon as we start liberating our toes, at least our toes can move, then almost automatically the universe will take note and will start helping us in other ways, and people will start coming our way. And rather than having people hanging on to us and being a problem, these people can actually help us extricate ourselves from whatever this situation is. But fundamentally, this hexagram is deliverance. It is about freeing ourselves from something, and we can free ourselves from it. And maybe there's a time limit. Maybe if we just hang on in this difficult situation and we don't do anything, then we might really get stuck. But there is a chance, there is an exit. It's a very real exit. Now, because we got a moving line, that does mean we move to a different hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 7, which is the army. And so we talked about other people, and other people can be there to help us, and the army seems to really emphasize this. We can become part of a functioning group, and if we're part of a functioning group, we obviously have to be aware of our responsibilities, and it's not all about us, and we're probably part of some command structure. We have to listen to people, we have to obey people, maybe other people have to obey us, and that balance between following and leadership is important. But perhaps it's also saying that if we've got a situation, deliverance, that we're trying to get out of, we really should not feel that we're on our own, that we can be part of a larger hierarchical group. And if we align ourselves to this group, then we're going to be in a very strong position. And as an individual, maybe there's not much we can do, but being part of the collective is something, at least in the short term, that we should aspire to be. And we are not alone. And maybe that is part of the message of the army. But also, fundamentally, this hexagram is about deliverance. We can free ourselves from something, though perhaps with other people's help. And now I want to finish off by looking at Mars in Virgo. So today, Mars indeed moves into Virgo. So here is the precise moment it moves into Virgo, London time. I make it that it moves into Virgo at, well, according to this, I said 9:35 at the beginning of this video. This chart says 9:36. So 9:36 London time, Mars moves into Virgo. That would be sort of 1:36 in California. What would that be? 4:36 in the morning in New York. That would be this evening in Australia or New Zealand, or 10:36 in the morning if you're in Paris, Rome, or Berlin. And so it is certainly a big change. And you know when you think of, for example, Donald Trump's his military parade, and the criticism that particularly those on the left were giving him for the way he was organising it, and the fact that he had that military parade on his birthday, I think, because his birthday was June the 14th, and you have also this obsession about kings and no kings. It is all about exaggeration, isn't it? This idea that Trump is unusually regal. I don't buy that, but it is a lot of it is about perceptions, and it's not surprising that when Mars in Leo on conjunct Regulus, people were obsessed about kingship and decided to have things like a no king day, Regulus being the royal star. But now Mars is okay. The moment Mars moves into Virgo, well, it's still on Regulus, but in a couple of days' time, Mars will be moving away from Regulus, and we can start to think about Mars and Virgo in a more pure form. So, with Mars in Virgo, you would have, expected people to be more into the detail. I mean, it's in a way sort of more of a social placement than Leo. Leo is all about the self and what we can do, the personality and the ego even. But with Virgo, Virgo is traditionally a service sign, and people who have their Mars in Virgo, they often want to get it right, but there can of course be an obsession with detail. One doesn't know to what extent that is a sort of a stereotype of Virgo. Of course, to an extent, it is a stereotype of Virgo. But Mars certainly likes to get it right and likes to make sure that nothing is left. Mars in Virgo wants to put energy into making sure that things are not left to chance. And so maybe in terms of what's happening in the world with Mars moving through Virgo, people, are finally going to realize that you've got to sort out the details. You can have these big ideas, Mars in Leo, but how are you actually going to go about it? And, going back to the Trump administration, so Trump becomes president, and, remember, he's got Leo rising and he's got Mars in Leo. And so he becomes president, and he has big ideas. I mean, every president is going to have big ideas, the big plan, and whether it's Doge or his ideas about quickly sort of, with his personality, he can just sort out the problem with Ukraine. He can just talk to Putin, sort out the problem in 5 minutes. That can be a Leo thing. And, but again, it's not just about Trump. But Trump is a good symbol of Mars in Leo. And yes, he does have Mars in Leo, but with Mars moving into Virgo, you're thinking, hold on, how actually are you going to do it? What are the steps you're going to take to achieve whatever you're trying to achieve? You want to cut government spending. How are you going to do it? You want to end the war in Ukraine. How are you going to do it? Or now we've got the problem with the Middle East, with Iran and Israel. Yeah, how are you going to do it? What details are you going to address in order to sort the problem out? And that does require hard work. And of course, Mars is moving out of a fire sign and into an earth sign. Mars in a fire sign, the ideas, you see the broad connections, but Mars in an Earth sign, well, you've got to actually start to put energy into dealing with the details, and you've got to really drill down at those details. So that might be a way in which Mars in Virgo is working. Now, Mars is early Virgo, right? So that's just where we are now. So there's one organization and one country that has their sun at pretty much 0 Virgo or 1 Virgo. And one of these organizations is NATO. So NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was ratified on August the 24th, 1949. Now, there are two charts for NATO. There is a chart which was when the countries broadly agreed about the formation of NATO, but NATO was ratified by Congress because I believe in America, if the United States has a foreign treaty, it does have to be ratified by Congress. So NATO was ratified on August the 24th, 1949. For some reason I've got 11:42 a.m. I'm not quite sure where that chart came from. And so you can see that NATO, at the time of its ratification, there was a new moon, and that the sun is at 1 degree 7 minutes Virgo. So over the next few days, Mars is moving over NATO's sun. Now, you might say, well, Mars is a fast-moving planet, crosses NATO's sun every couple of years. Is that so important? Well, there is a huge amount going on. Every week something new happens. And of course, we're thinking with NATO, we're primarily thinking about NATO's war against Russia, where obviously with Ukraine as its proxy. NATO is obsessed about defeating Russia. And so with Mars conjunct the Sun, something might happen, or there may be a new urgency here with Mars conjunct the Sun, although the whole thing has been completely complicated by what's been going on in Iran. You know, the world cannot just focus on Ukraine all the time. And of course, the moment you had the October the 7th attack, when Hamas invaded Israel and committed all those atrocities, the moment that happened, the world's attention shifted. It wasn't just about Ukraine. And before October the 7th, everyone was into Ukraine. Young people were into Ukraine, and then a lot of people did just drop Ukraine, and now it was all about free Palestine. I mean, so things do change, and so that's one manifestation of Mars hitting, going across, Mars going into Virgo, it hitting NATO. And then it hits a country which is very much connected with NATO. And that country that it hits is Ukraine. Ukraine has the same birthday as NATO. NATO was ratified on August the 24th, 1949. Ukraine declared its independence on August the 24th, 1991. So it's kind of not surprising that NATO has chosen Ukraine as its instrument for destroying Russia. I mean, that's what it's there for, or for breaking Russia. And so, poor Ukraine is a battering ram, and it's kind of not surprising, is it? It's not surprising at all, given the fact that Ukraine has the sun at 0 degrees 56 Virgo. So Mars is about to make a conjunction to Ukraine's sun, and will we know how it happens? I mean, I think that this is not a good time for Ukraine because of this Iran thing. I mean, this completely removes the attention from Ukraine, and at a time when, whatever people are saying in the mainstream media, Russia is making really powerful progress, across the board in Ukraine. It's the war is very much going in Russia's favor now, and this is the last thing Ukraine wants, is for attention to focus towards Iran. So I mean, I don't know, with you would think that maybe with Mars conjunct, with Mars moving towards a conjunction of the Sun, that, you know, the country's under pressure. Maybe the country is going to have to do something spectacular to get everyone's attention, you know, to move the attention away from just Israel. What about us, you know? And some big spectacular attack. Of course, their attack on the air bases kind of sort of backfired in another way, in a way, because it completely messed up the whole sort of START treaty and really compromised the treaty regarding strategic nuclear arsenals between the US and Russia. So yeah, but still, there may be that temptation there, or it just could represent some reverse on the battlefield that we may not actually know how it manifests. And you know, when we're talking about, by the way, with NATO and the Ukraine, who both have their sun at 0 degrees or 1 degree Virgo, don't forget that Uranus is about to move into Aries. Sorry, Gemini, but Uranus is about to move into Gemini. So when Uranus moves into Gemini, on I think July the 7th, just in less than a month now, it will be square NATO's sun, and it will be square, by definition almost, NATO square Ukraine's sun. But I will be talking about that a bit later. And you know, I want to finish by just talking about, very quickly, just looking at a few people who have their Mars in Virgo, and you know, just to give us an idea about the different ways in which Mars in Virgo might work. And you know, the general theme of Mars in Virgo would be a planet which is, you know, Mars is where you put your energy and how you put your energy. Now, you could say that's more relevant for a man than a woman, because you could say that Mars is less likely to be projected in a male chart than in a female chart. And so perhaps a woman who has Mars in Virgo, that might say something about the partner she might choose, may say something about her father or a husband, boyfriend, some other significant man in her life. So there may be a slight difference there. So let's start off with a Supreme Court judge. So this is a chart of Samuel Alito, who is on the Supreme Court, and he has Mars in Virgo. Now, I'm not going to really look at this chart in great detail, but if you've got Mars in Virgo, you are really going to be obsessed about details, or you could be obsessed about details. And you would have thought, if you want to be a successful lawyer, for example, a Supreme Court judge, having Mars in Virgo might actually be quite useful. And another Supreme Court justice who has got his Mars in Virgo is Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh, again, his Mars at 26 Virgo, pretty close to Samuel Alito's Mars in Virgo. So that just shows that there could be a legal side. So if you want to be a successful lawyer and you have Mars in Virgo, well, you know, that certainly might help. And another lawyer, or someone who started off as a lawyer, but who eventually became a politician, was Barack Obama. So Barack Obama has his Mars in Virgo, and his Mars is trine Saturn, and so yeah, you know, Mars trine Saturn, Mars in Virgo trine Saturn in Capricorn. You could say that Barack Obama knows what is important, and you know, whatever you say about him, he was a two-term president, so politically he was successful, and he was seen possibly as a relatively intellectual president who made some effort to understand his brief. I mean, not every president reads what he's supposed to read. I don't think that Donald Trump is especially well read. He's not a details person. You know, you could say that, but Boris Johnson was not really a details person as Prime Minister. But, I mean, just because you're not a details person doesn't mean to say you're a bad politician. But Although, in his own way, there are certain details that Donald Trump is obsessed about, but it's usually what someone has tweeted. It's not what someone has written in some policy document. And so Barack Obama, as a relatively intellectual president who seemed to read a lot, seemed to know what was going on, that might be his Mars in Virgo. And yeah, Mars in Virgo. Additionally, there is another side to Mars in Virgo. Virgo is a planet that you might associate with progressive causes, and people who are less fortunate than oneself. That can be Mars in Virgo because it's a service planet, service sign, and he was a community organizer. So I assume that at some stage in his life he was concerned about people who were, underprivileged, and so that might be a way that Mars in Virgo is working. By the way, I'm not giving an opinion on Barack Obama here. I'm just using it as an example of Mars in Virgo. You can use your own opinions on Barack Obama to try to understand what that Mars in Virgo might mean. But I just, when me talking about him, I didn't really want to put forward any opinions. And Mars in Virgo can be obsessed about details in a way that can be totally destructive. And Charles Manson had Mars in Virgo. Now, I didn't read up about the Charles Manson case before doing this, but if I remember rightly, Charles Manson would get very upset if he perceived that someone had ripped him off, or someone had betrayed him or let him down. And it was actually often about money. I think the reason he broke into that house where Sharon Tate was eventually killed or rather not just necessarily him, but his followers, because he was annoyed that someone had let him down, and he was quite vindictive in that sense. Some little detail which he shouldn't have been concerned about, he was concerned about. And Charles Manson has a Mars conjunct Neptune in Virgo. So, okay, that Neptune probably is more important than the fact that Mars is in Virgo. You can't use astrology and not look at signs and say Mars conjunct Neptune in terms of the drugs and the violence. It says so much about Charles Manson. But, the Virgo does give it a surprising earthiness, and that Mars-Neptune conjunction is the only two planets in Earth signs for Charles Manson. And so there were certain details that got really irrelevant details, material details that just drove him crazy, and were perhaps one of the reasons why those murders might have happened. Now, if you've got Mars in Virgo, detail could be important. You would want everything to be perfect, and I don't know if you remember her, but Dylan Mulvaney. You remember Dylan Mulvaney? She was the one. It was a he originally, but it was decided to identify as a woman, and she was the one who was involved in that campaign that Bud Light had, that disastrous Bud Light campaign, which almost sort of completely wrecked the brand. And she was the sort of the front of this campaign. And obviously, Dylan Mulvaney obviously makes a huge amount of effort into what she looks like, looking like a woman, obviously. That must require, a huge amount of effort. Now, Dylan Mulvaney's horoscope is fascinating because it's got Venus on the midheaven. So here, for someone who, what's the phrase, a trans woman with Venus on the midheaven, you can see astrologically why this person would have decided to identify as a woman with Venus on the midheaven. But Mars is also in Virgo, and you could say that Mars trine Neptune is just that effort in having to look like a real woman. Yeah, it must take ages. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't know what to do, but you can perhaps see how Mars in Virgo is working. Everything just has to be perfect in order to create this image. And George Bush Jr. had so we had George Bush Jr., Barack Obama's predecessor, had Mars in Virgo, and a singleton planet in Earth. I don't know how that. I don't particularly know how that Mars in Virgo works out. I think that he was quite into sort of appearances and how things should be. With Mars in Virgo, there could have perhaps be a certain amount of hypocrisy there. I mean, one often associates Mars in Virgo with hypocrisy. You're saying one thing and doing something else, and of course, George Bush Jr. He had this sort of turbulent life as a young man, and he had his whatever he was involved in, and then he becomes sort of hyper conservative as a president. But I don't want to say too much about it because I haven't really thought too much about George Bush Jr. But George Walker Bush, I haven't really thought too much about it. But yeah, he certainly had Mars in Virgo, and Mars in Virgo, yes, can be obsessed with the body, and can be quite obsessed with the body in perhaps a sexual sense. So the playwright Joe Orton was a 1960s playwright. He was gay, and he was known for being incredibly promiscuous. He wrote his diaries, which you can get hold of his diary, about what he did, and that was why his boyfriend killed him. I mean, he was living with a man slightly older than him who sort of made him in some ways, but there was a lot of jealousy. Joe Orton was, becoming very successful. His partner was not so successful, and his partner was what's his name? Kenneth Halliwell, and so Kenneth Halliwell read the diaries and was so upset that he beat Joe Orton to death. But so the Mars in Virgo. Remember, this is Mars in Virgo conjunct Jupiter. In this case, can actually lead to an obsession with the body, an obsession perhaps with sexual function, and in this case, can lead to extreme sort of promiscuity. He was incredibly promiscuous, and also, if you look in terms of his plays, I mean, his plays are. I find them amusing. I think his plays are great, but he is really very very specific, and talking about bodily function, and what was it? What the butler saw. Talking about, there was a mention of Winston Churchill's private parts, and this would have been quite perhaps a bit outrageous in the 60s to have to talk about this, and so that that might be how Mars in Virgo is working. And on another extreme, should we say, would be the Pope, the current Pope, Leo the 14th. He has Mars in Virgo, and difficult to know how this Mars in Virgo is working out so far. And we don't have a time of birth for Leo the 14th, and so it's difficult. But I just get the impression with Leo the 14th that he is someone who's quite precise. He likes to do things in a particular way. Everything is rather planned, maybe. We don't know yet. And of course, he does have 4 planets in Virgo. And so I'm slightly concerned with those 4 planets in Virgo. One wonders, Mars in Virgo, he may be putting just a lot of energy into doing things properly. And is this someone who is going to be a reformer? Is he going to be a pope to remember? Yeah, my immediate impression with Leo the 14th is the answer is no. I may be wrong, but I think that you could say, well, it's a safe pair of hands, but is a safe pair of hands what is needed at the moment to be leading the Catholic Church? And finally, I want to talk 2 women. Firstly is the leader of the British Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, and she is under a lot of pressure. Most people the consensus seems to be that she's not doing a good job and that her days as leader of the Conservative Party are numbered. I'm not in the UK. I actually quite like her chart in some respects. It does actually chime with the 1066 chart of England, and she does have Mars in Virgo, and the Mars in Virgo. Part of a problem with Mars in Virgo, well, it's conjunct Jupiter, and she's known for being quite aggressive. That she will deliberately. She has a reputation for picking fights. So, what is the phrase? So, if she sees a fight, she will cross what's the phrase? She will cross a street to get involved in a fight. So that might be her Mars conjunct Jupiter. But Mars in Virgo might be about putting too much energy into the wrong thing. She put a lot of effort into accusing Nigel Farage and the Reform Party of massaging their membership figures. She decided to pick on this thing, and it was the wrong battle to choose because she was wrong. The Reform's description of their membership was absolutely right. But so Mars in Virgo has to be careful that she chooses the wrong fight. I mean, Mars in Virgo is very verbal. She is quite verbal, and she can be quite aggressive in her language, and she can pick fights. And so that might be how Mars in Virgo is working. And finally, Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa had Mars in Virgo, and you might say that really is, the perfect description of Mars in Virgo. Mars puts her energy into service, helping the poor. Mars, where is the projection? Maybe she's projecting it onto Jesus, the male Jesus. So if a nun has Mars in Virgo, that might be a way of doing. Particularly, by the way, there is a view that I think it was Percy Seymour wrote a book on Jesus and the horoscope of Jesus, and if I remember rightly, Percy Seymour thought that it was most likely that Jesus actually was a Virgo, not a Pisces and not a Capricorn. And so Mars in Virgo, that could be the projection. And even if it's not projected, Mars in Virgo putting her energy into service. Now, I'm actually not a fan of Mother Teresa. I think that she is someone who has been wrongly idolized. I think that there has been her hobnobbing with dictators, and was it Duvalier, and that's the Haitian dictator, and that would be Virgo. The ends justify the means. We have to raise the money, we have to keep the mission going, and if we have to deal with unsavory characters, well, it doesn't matter, does it? And with Mars and Virgo, there's always that possibility of hypocrisy and double standards, and one person being treated differently from others, and perhaps forgetting what you're actually trying to achieve. So still, even if you think she's wonderful, well, Mars and Virgo would fit that perfectly. That is about service. So those are a few thoughts about Mars and Virgo. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.